They say love doesn't keep score, but I kept every receipt. 10 years of payments, 2 roofs repaired, 1 septic tank replaced, and not a single thank you card. So when my mother stood up at my sister's birthday lunch and announced they were handing over our family home to Eloise, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just picked up my wine glass and realized for the first time in a decade, I'd finally stopped hoping they'd see me. The wine glasses on the table caught the afternoon light and scattered it in perfect symmetry except for mine. Mine was still upside down. I stared at it, then at the name card in front of me. Julianne Brooks, printed in the kind of generic cursive they use for corporate events and funeral programs. Someone had spelled it correctly this time, which felt like a small miracle. But the placement back corner, behind the ice bucket, across from the only empty seat at the table. The hostess hadn't hesitated. That's table 6 right over there by the gallery entrance. Not family table, not reserved, just a vague hand gesture toward the edge of the room, like I was someone's +1. I took my seat quietly, smoothed the linen napkin over my lap, and tried not to notice the view. From here I could see the rest of them, my sister Eloise, radiant in a cream silk dress that looked more bridal than birthday. Her fiancé, Richard the tech investor, with perfectly tousled hair and a voice that belonged in podcasts. My mother, Olivia, perched like a queen between them. 3 champagne glasses clinked. Eloise laughed in that wide-open way that made strangers lean closer. The waiter poured rosé into crystal flutes, skipping my glass without a glance. I reached for the water pitcher myself. Mira, a former intern-turned-friend who now worked at my firm, leaned in. "You okay?" I nodded but didn't answer. It was Eloise's 40th birthday, a family-forward lunch, as she'd called it in the email invite. She'd picked the location, a historic Adobe-turned-boutique restaurant in the foothills of Santa Fe. Rustic beams, hand-thrown plates, very curated. She even asked for dress code coordination. Desert earth tones, but elevated. I wore a rust-colored linen jumpsuit. Comfortable, understated, hand-sewn, like the cabin, like me. Mom hadn't greeted me when I arrived. She'd waved. One of those quick, fluttery gestures people use when they don't want to interrupt more important conversations. The waiter finally brought my wine. I thanked him softly, then lifted the glass, holding it mid-air for a moment. Julianne Eloise called from the main table. She raised her own glass. We were just toasting family. A beat passed. Everyone turned to look at me. I smiled. To family, I said. But I didn't drink. Julianne thought the worst had passed until the waiter brought out a box, and Eloise stood to deliver one more surprise. The box was wrapped in handmade paper, textured ivory with tiny gold flecks that caught the light. It looked expensive. Precious. The kind of wrapping you save, not tear open. A waiter placed it gently on the center of Eloise's table, like it was a cake made of porcelain. Everyone clapped. My stomach tightened. Eloise stood, adjusted her dress, and placed both hands flat on the table like she was about to launch a TED Talk. So she said, beaming, "I know I said no gifts, but I lied." A polite chuckle rolled through the room. She looked at our mother, then at Richard. This year has meant everything to me. A new decade, a new engagement, and the kind of clarity you only get after loss and growth. I knew where this was going, or I thought I did. Maybe an engagement announcement, or something symbolic from Dad's things he passed 4 years ago, quietly after a short fight with pancreatic cancer. He'd been a quiet man who kept screws in old jars and wrote to-do lists in block letters. He was the one who taught me to sandwich balance my checkbook and say less. Mom wiped a tear before Eloise even continued. Richard placed a steadying hand on her back. Eloise looked at me for the briefest moment, then away. "Our family home in Tasuk, Dad's house, really," she said. Her voice softening into reverence, has been part of our story for decades. After he passed, Mom stayed there, but the upkeep. Well, you know how it goes. But this year, something beautiful happened. She turned to Richard. We decided it's time to start our next chapter there. The clapping started again, scattered and confused. Mom stood now, adding to the theater. We're giving the house to Eloise and Richard, she said, smiling proudly. It's time it goes to the next generation. A beat. My fork scraped against my plate. That sound again, high, metallic, unwanted. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I stared at them, blinking, trying to locate any sign this was a joke. Some elaborate setup for another toast. Nothing. Just my sister glowing like a woman who'd been crowned. My hands curled under the table. The house. That house. I wasn't just paying the mortgage. I'd refinanced it when Dad got sick, covered the overdue taxes during the pandemic, and paid for the new septic system that no one wanted to talk about. I still had the loan documents in a folder labeled Legacy, Do Not Touch. I hadn't made a big deal about it. Hadn't asked to be added to the deed. I told myself it was about honoring Dad, giving Mom stability, giving Eloise time. I believed it would all work out in the end. It had. Just not for me. The applause faded. Someone popped open champagne. My chair felt smaller. I felt smaller. Mira glanced at me, eyes wide. Wait, wasn't that yes? I said tightly. Eloise caught my eye. Just for a second. She didn't look guilty, just satisfied. And then she said something that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. We can't wait to renovate the back studio, she smiled. Maybe turn it into a nursery or an artist's loft for me. She didn't know that space had been my father's woodworking shed. I'd spent every Saturday for 6 months sanding the floors, replacing rotted beams, restaining the windows. That studio was mine, was. Julianne walked out of the restaurant with her napkin still folded and her name card tucked in her pocket. She didn't cause a scene, not yet, but the unraveling had begun. I didn't speak to anyone as I left the restaurant. Not Mira, not the server still holding a dessert tray, not even Mom who called after me in a chirpy voice. Don't be dramatic, Jules. The door shut behind me with a thud that felt heavier than it should have. I walked toward the dusty lot where I'd parked, heels clicking against the cracked adobe tiles. Santa Fe's late afternoon sun washed everything gold, but it didn't warm me. In the quiet of my truck, I finally let out a breath. It came out as a half laugh, half gasp. I gripped the steering wheel like it might steady something deeper. They gave her the house, not just a house, not some vacation cabin or investment duplex. That house. My father's last project. The place where every window trim still had his pencil marks behind the paint. The place where I'd patched the roof myself during a monsoon season, because the handyman bailed. Where I'd eaten dinners on mismatched chairs with Mom during the worst of her grief. That house was mine not because of paperwork, but because I earned it every single month for 10 years, and yet just handed over, gift-wrapped with applause. That night, I pulled out the file box from under my bed, the one labeled Tasuk 2013 present. It had everything: mortgage statements, repair invoices, copies of utility bills still in my name. I laid them out on the dining table, page by page, like I was building a case. Not for court, at least not yet, but for my own sanity. I needed to see it, quantify it. 10 years, over $170,000 in payments, $32,000 in renovations. I flipped to the folder labeled Septic Replacement 2021. Still smelled faintly of contractor-grade paper. Why didn't I put my name on the deed? Because I trusted them. Because they were family. Because when Dad passed, Mom looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Just hold things steady for a while. I can't think yet." So I did. Eloise had been in Boston then, hopping between fellowships and startups, dating men who used words like synergy and disruption. She sent flowers to the funeral and flew in late. She cried. She left. I stayed. I sat back in my chair. Across the room, a faint hum came from the mini fridge, filling the silence. I wasn't angry, not the loud burning kind. What I felt was colder, like ice forming quietly on glass invisible until it cracks. They hadn't just taken the house. They'd taken the labor, the years, the quiet assumptions. The part of me that kept saying, it's okay. They'll see. But what really broke me wasn't the deed. It was what Eloise said about the studio, my studio. She wanted to turn it into a nursery. I pressed my palms against my eyes. Not because of what she planned, but because she didn't know. Or worse, maybe she did. Maybe it didn't matter. The next morning, I drove out to the desert, to my place. A one-room adobe I had built from scratch on a 5-acre plot I'd bought during a rare bonus year. No mortgage, no neighbors, no expectations, just space, solitude, and silence, the kind that lets you breathe all the way down to your bones. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and exhaled. For the first time in 2 days. On the windowsill sat a chipped mug, the one Dad gave me the week before he died. Inside it, a spare key. Not to the house they'd just stolen, to this one, mine. Julianne thought she'd found a safe distance, but the next invitation would pull her right back to the table where the real betrayal was still waiting. The invitation came 3 days later in the form of a text from Mom dinner at Eloise's. Saturday, just us girls. Nothing fancy. Don't be a stranger. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. The emoji made my stomach turn. A heart like that wasn't affection, it was plaster over a crack. I didn't reply, but I showed up. Not because I forgave them, because I needed to know how deep this went. Eloise lived in a minimalist, modern home on the northern edge of Santa Fe, all open concept and reclaimed wood that looked like no one had ever actually reclined on it. The dinner table was already set when I arrived, 6 settings for 5 people. I noticed. Jules, she said, air-kissing my cheek like we hadn't stood on opposite ends of a fault line a few days ago. So glad you made it. Mom was already seated, sipping chilled white wine pearls around her neck like armor. There were cheese boards, rosemary crackers, and candles that smelled like bergamot and manufactured harmony. I took the empty seat at the far end again. A pattern, a message. Eloise dove straight in. So Mom's been thinking of downsizing, she said, slicing a fig. The house is too much for her, and Richard and I are already beginning renovations. We've been talking about what's next for her. I nodded, slow and neutral. What's next? Eloise glanced at Mom, who gave a tight smile. Well, we think it's time for her to have a space that's peaceful. No maintenance, no stairs, close to town, but still quiet. My jaw tensed. Eloise went on, we've looked at some assisted living options, but honestly, nothing felt right. Not like your place. I blinked. My what your cabin, Mom chimed in. The little adobe house in Cerrillos. It's perfect. 1 level. No city noise. The view's healing. And Eloise added, it's barely used. Right, you mostly live in town. We figured you could stay with Mira or just keep your office there. This would be more of a family gesture. Family gesture. I sat back slowly, letting the words settle like dust before a storm. Let me get this straight, I said calmly. You gave away the house I paid for without asking. And now you want the only property I actually own so Mom can live in it? Mom looked wounded. Not take, sweetie. Just stay in. Indefinitely, I asked. Eloise's smile didn't falter. Well, we assumed you'd be supportive. You've always been the one holding things down. Supportive. It wasn't just gall, it was expectation lacquered in flattery. I looked at Mom, who fidgeted with her wine stem like it might offer her a better excuse, and then Eloise, who had always floated above consequence. The room buzzed faintly from the dimmer light, but everything else was still. Pressurized. I could feel it, the line. And this time I didn't step back from it. No, I said. Mom's brows pulled together. What? No, I repeated steady. You don't get to guilt me into giving away another part of my life just because I stayed quiet before. Julianne. Mom's snapped voice rising. This is your mother asking, I gave you everything. No, I cut in sharper now. You gave Eloise everything. You handed her a house she didn't lift a finger for. And now you expect me to hand over the one thing that's actually mine, just so you can feel comfortable in your golden years. Eloise slammed her fork down. There it is, she hissed. The martyr complex. You always act like you're the victim. No, I said. I just stopped pretending I'm not. The room fell into a tight silence. And then finally I stood. I hope you both enjoy your new house, I said. But you won't be staying in mine. Julianne thought the line had been drawn until her phone buzzed, with an alert motion detected at Cirillo's property. The alert came at 7:42 a.m. the following Monday. Motion detected. Front entry Cirillo's property. A snapshot loaded on my phone screen, blurry outlines. Early light, 2 figures at the porch. I tapped the feed. Mom. Eloise. My mother was holding a potted succulent. Eloise carried a canvas tote that bulged with kitchen towels and something wrapped in bubble wrap. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. I stared at the footage, heart pounding, not from panic, but from the sheer audacity. A second ping. Backdoor sensor activated. My breath caught. The back door. That one was locked with a deadbolt. Unless they had found the spare key. I had hidden it in a carved wooden birdhouse tucked under a cedar beam. Dad and I had mounted together 12 years ago. I hadn't touched it in years. It wasn't labeled, it wasn't obvious, but they knew it was there. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe he told them. Richard, Eloise's fiancé. He was the one who helped me mount my security cameras 2 years ago. Who'd ask casually about the emergency access spots just in case you get locked out. I clenched my jaw. I'd given them the benefit of the doubt. They'd taken the benefit and the key. By 8:15, I was in my truck. By 9:03, I turned off the main road and onto the narrow gravel path leading to my cabin. The sun was higher now, casting clean, sharp shadows across the high desert floor. I parked hard, slammed the door, dust flared around my boots. And there they were sitting like settlers on my porch. Eloise sipped from a ceramic mug. My mug. The one I bought from that tiny pottery shop in Madrid. The one with the chipped glaze and uneven lip I love too much to replace. My mother looked up first. Oh, Julianne. We didn't think you'd be up so early. Didn't think I'd be. I stopped myself. Laughed. Low. Dangerous? Eloise stood brushing imaginary dust from her yoga pants. It was just temporary, she said smoothly. You were so upset the other night we figured this would give everyone space to cool off. Cool off, I repeated. By entering my property without permission. Mom waved a hand. It's not like we broke in. You left a key. I left a key, I snapped. Not an invitation. I stepped forward, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. The feed went live, showing the backdoor entry time-stamped and geotagged. I turned the screen toward them. Santa Fe County considers unauthorized entry, especially with intent to inhabit, as trespassing. I've already contacted the sheriff. Eloise's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past them, opened the front door, and stepped inside. The house smelled wrong. Lemongrass and patchouli, Eloise's signature candle scent. There was a grocery bag on the counter, dishes in the sink. My space was no longer mine. I returned outside. You have 10 minutes. Mom looked stricken. Where will I go? I don't know, I said coldly. But I do know where you won't. They left, not with screaming, not with tears, with the silence of people who'd assumed control and just lost it. That night I called Mira. I need a favor, I said. Can you recommend a lawyer who knows property and boundary law? Mira didn't ask why. She just said I know exactly the one. Julianne wasn't just reclaiming her space. She was ready to expose the full truth. And this time, there would be no hiding behind family. I met the lawyer 2 days later in a dusty office above a plant nursery. Her name was Ramona Kyle, early 40s. No nonsense black curls pulled into a bun so tight it made my own scalp twinge. She didn't offer coffee, just said, "Let's see the paper trail." I handed her a thick folder. She skimmed the first 3 pages, then nodded slowly. "They never added you to the title." "No." "I didn't ask." "Good," she said. "Then you didn't waive anything." That surprised me. "Good," she looked up. "It means they can't accuse you of backing out of a formal transfer agreement. You were just funding their comfort." The way she said it with surgical detachment made the years I'd spent feel like a ledger entry. Maybe that was the point. That night back home, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at the top of a blank document. My finger hovered, then typed, "For 10 years I paid for a house that wasn't mine. Because I thought love meant silence. Here's what it actually cost me." I attached scans, mortgage statements, contractor receipts, wire transfers, even screenshots of the backdoor motion alert with timestamps. Then I uploaded a clip from my security camera, no audio, just Eloise using the spare key walking in like she owned the place. No anger, no accusations, just facts. I titled it, "This is not a family feud. This is a boundary." I didn't post it to Facebook. I emailed it to Mira and I asked her to post it for me in a private women's forum. She moderated mostly professionals, mostly quiet types like me, who had stories they'd never told. I went to bed expecting silence. I woke up to hundreds of replies. Same story, different zip code. "Thank you for showing your receipts. I wish I had. My sister stole my inheritance." I stayed silent. Not anymore. Some women shared their stories. Others just sent a heart emoji. It didn't feel performative. It felt like oxygen. Mira texted me. This hit a nerve. "Want me to share it wider?" I said yes. Within hours, the post migrated. LinkedIn, Reddit. One of those viral personal finance Instagram accounts posted a breakdown of how much I'd invested in the Tasuk house. That was when the real shift began. By Thursday, my phone buzzed with a message from Eloise. "Are you seriously making this public? This is so beneath you." I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another text from Mom this time. "Julianne, I am humiliated. Take it down." I turned my phone off. The next day, a message came from an unexpected sender, Jackie L. Eloise's college roommate. It was short. "I remember when she told us you'd never ask for anything, no matter how much you gave." I hated that she was right. I read it 3 times. That night, I stood in front of the filing cabinet, pulled out the original loan agreement for the house, and added one sticky note in Ramona's handwriting, "Legal occupancy ownership." I placed it on top like a title page. I wasn't out for revenge. I just wanted the facts to speak, and this time I wasn't going to whisper. Julianne had reclaimed her voice, but the final chapter wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about choosing what and who was worth keeping. The flowers arrived in a vase that looked like it cost more than my kitchen table. Lilies, white, fragrant. Wrapped in a ribbon the color of old money. There was no card. I didn't need one. I walked them to the trash without pause, left the vase by the recycling bin. My peace didn't come in petals. That weekend, I drove out to the cabin not to hide, but to decide. The air was crisp, early fall, the kind of morning that held just enough chill to remind you that change didn't ask permission. I stepped onto the porch, boots creaking on the sun-warmed boards, and sat with a mug of coffee. The real one. Chipped. Mine. Across the dirt road, a truck slowed and stopped. A woman stepped out, gray braid canvas jacket, wide-brimmed hat. June, the new tenant. She approached cautiously, like I might revoke the lease with a look. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," she said, holding a manila folder. "Just wanted to double-check a few things before I move in next week." Of course, I smiled. "You're right on time." We went over the details, utilities, mailbox key, the solar panel quirks. Then she paused by the threshold of the back porch. "These napkins," she said, fingering the folded linens in the drawer. "They handmade." I nodded. They were a gift. I left them behind once. Now they stay. She looked at me longer this time. It feels like someone really lived here. I did, I said. Until I remembered I could live somewhere else. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Ramona's office with a signed update. I'd transferred temporary power of attorney to her to finalize two things: a long-term lease agreement for June, a formal letter to my mother outlining her official notice of non-residency and denying future claims on the Cirillo's property. When I signed the last page, Ramona asked, "You sure you don't want to send a copy to your sister?" "No," I said, standing. "She doesn't need proof. She needs distance." The final message came a week later, tucked inside a pale yellow envelope slid under my door. "Julianne, we know we made mistakes. Please don't shut the door on your mother." It wasn't signed, but it was in my mother's handwriting. I didn't reply, but I did mail a copy of the prepaid lease agreement for a retirement unit in Albuquerque. 1 bedroom, private courtyard, close to her book club and church. A short note clipped to it read, "No strings, no cabin, no performance, just peace if you want it." That night, I opened the small wooden box in my hallway drawer. Inside, the old house key to Tasuk, scratched worn heavy with what it used to mean. A photo of Dad's sanding window frames. The sticky note Ramona wrote, "Legal occupancy ownership." I added one more item, a brass hook. From the cabin. The one Eloise ripped out to hang her own towel during the test run. I placed it gently inside. Then I shut the lid, labeled the box, "Things I Survived." And for the first time in a decade, I didn't carry any of it with me. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If this hit something personal, you're not alone. And if you thought this was intense, wait till you hear what happened when I found out who paid for my sister's honeymoon. See you in the next one.